Good morning, folks. It's November the 2nd on the cusp of the American election. And I don't need to remind my fellow Canadians that when a mouse sleeps with an elephant, you got to be very worried about when that elephant decides to roll over in bed. There's no escaping the repercussions of America on Canada. It's why the Queen Victoria put the capital up here in this ungodly place, the second coldest capital in the world, thinking that it might be far enough away from the border to protect us from American invasion. Nevertheless, what's going on in the States with regard to this election? I'm not a prophet, so I'm not going to make any predictions as to the outcome of the election in terms of who will win. But I will make observations about what is happening in the US and in Canada and why. In 1861, all the attempts at dealing with the slave issue in the States had failed. The Mason-Dixon line wasn't going to hold. New territories were being admitted as states. And then the question became whether they would be slave or free states. The Missouri Compromise was indeed compromised. But something more significant was happening behind all of this. As the Industrial Revolution ramped up, the North was becoming industrialized. People were leaving the farms, moving to the cities, and starting to work in factories. And the South, run by an entitled elite, said no to the Industrial Revolution and required slavery to run their plantations. Slavery was an institution that deliberately created a labor pool that they could abuse, using similar excuses to what the government uses today by the wealthy elite. I'll read what I posted the other day. Division in the USA is coming to a head along exactly the same political lines it did in 1861. The Democrats still divide humanity based on race. In the past, they considered blacks inferior and fit for nothing but brute labor to serve their white masters, while today, identity politics labels visible minorities as needing extra care and guidance from the wealthy white elite in the Democratic Party. Visible minorities are being told that they can only better themselves if they allow the state to interfere in their own self-determination. A cheap party card trick, which has replaced what 19th century slaves were told by their slave masters, namely, that they needed the plantations to care for them because they were incapable of doing that for themselves. While the Republican Party, largely, still leaves matters of color, culture, and social status up to individuals. Basically, the Democratic Party has merely replaced the hard and brutal slavery of old with the kid glove authoritarianism of the postmodern identity cult that they've become. And they'll tear apart America to prove it by keeping folk in slavery to them, just as they tried to do in 1861 and afterwards when they lost the war through Jim Crow laws and sharecropping and other horrendous abuses, all because they refused to follow English common law and treat all equally before the law. So, with regard to what will happen tomorrow, here's to hoping that the Union will prevail once again. And we see the same thing happening in Canada, that we have a wealthy elite sitting up on that hill who think, first of all, that they can use us as slaves to fund the machinery that enriches them. You see all this corruption that's happened with Trudeau and the WE scandal and any other number of other things with regard to crony capitalism like SNC-Lavalin and Bombardier, that the same type of wealthy elite have used the government to abuse the citizen, to garner power and wealth without working for it themselves. There's two choices that face us. We will either pursue individual liberty and equality under the law, or we're going to replace that with collectivism, identity politics, and to be lorded it over by an undemocratically functioning ruling elite. Why are they undemocratic? Because the ones that are democratically elected have gotten into bed, so deep in bed that they can't be extricated from it, with an unelected set of oligarchs, crony capitalists in bed with the government that are fully intent on enslaving society. It's time to realize that there's only two choices. Think for yourself, be for yourself, take care of yourself, be self-reliant and independent. Apply the rule of law blindly, or to be lorded it over by a bunch of wealthy elite. And I'll say this further. If by some miracle Trump wins tomorrow, America will burn twice as hot as it's burned already under the neo-Nazi woke elite that are tearing apart her cities. No one is immune from this. Nowhere in the West is there a safe place to hide from the sort of corrupt oligarchs that have taken over the system. I don't know what we can do to restore limited constitutional democracy, but we need to have a conversation about how. And because I have cousins in the States, as do many of you undoubtedly, and many, many friends, I wish for the very best of outcomes tomorrow, and for a peaceful transition of power, if that is the choice of the people. Have a great day, folks.